And thank you very much to members of the media for making time to join us during this the media briefing, and also to greet the viewers and the listeners at home. I had indicated at the onset of my tenure that I'm going to make it a habit to share with the nation real-time updates in relation to the performance of the grid and how far we are in addressing the challenges of load shedding. I did make the point that we will try as much as possible to illustrate that we are indeed making progress against the mandate that the President has assigned me. Essentially, there are two primary focus areas. The first one is to reduce the intensity of load shedding. So you know that we have hit a historic high of stage 6 of load shedding. So my interpretation of reducing the intensity of load shedding means that we have to gradually go to lower stages of load shedding, and ultimately resulting in the elimination of load shedding. And then the second aspect of the assignment is to reduce the frequency of load shedding. So is to address the number of load shedding days, bring them down. We know that in 2021 we had about 75 days of load shedding. In 2022 that grew approximately threefold to about 205 days of load shedding. And of course now we are on track for a record number of load shedding days in a calendar year, unless we do something dramatic. And you will see that we are beginning to show the results. And I also want to just pay tribute to the workers at ESCOM for the tremendous work that they are doing, starting with the board led by Mr. Mpomakwana, an exceptionally talented team of a group of men and women whose sole intention is to make a contribution towards the resolution of what is an existential problem that is confronting us. And also to thank the executive management of ESCOM, led by Mr. Khalib Kasim, for the exceptional work that they are doing in the leadership, of course, at the technical level of the resolution of the load shedding problem. And in particular, I want to single out the team at Generation, led by Mr. Beki Nxumalo, the various general managers at the respective power stations, and also the ordinary workers, the men and women who toil on a daily basis, who are making it possible for us to get closer to the resolution of the load shedding problem in the country. And also I want to say that we are exceptionally grateful to South Africans, both industry and households, who are doing everything possible to reduce demand, unnecessary consumption. And we are beginning to see the efforts, the aggregate efforts of the men and women in the country, industry, and I really want to say we are grateful for that. And we also are beginning to see that there are signs that the efforts that we are making in ensuring that we ramp up the campaign on the demand side management, encouraging households and businesses to be judicious in the manner in which they consume electricity, are beginning to bear fruit. Because if you look at our winter outlook, we had projected that we could be hitting highs of about 34,000 megawatts, and we have not reached anything close to that. And we believe that it has to do with the change of attitude of households and industry, and also is a function of the effectiveness of the campaign that we are running. So I'm going to use this opportunity, as usual, to take you through the numbers. The numbers are very important for us to be able to understand, appreciate also the extent and the degree to which we are making progress in this regard. We have made it now a practice that, because we are having this briefing on a weekly basis, so I'm going to give you a 5-day average, if you like, what has been happening on a 5 days. Of course, I did say, when I said real time, I mean delayed, in terms of that I'm giving it to you, if you like, 5 days later, a historic record of what has happened 5 days later. And of course, this is factual. There are a number of things that we are beginning to see which are positive. The first one is that the capacity available now, you can see that is beginning to plateau at about 29,000 megawatts. So essentially, you have seen that from the 26th of June, we're sitting at 28,664 megawatts of capacity that is available. And we close the week, the 30th of June, at 29,913. So you can see that we are making significant improvements, about 1,300 megawatts of improvement. So you are getting to see that, although initially when I started the briefings, I had said we are making marginal yet significant improvements. But now you are seeing that this is real. And what is encouraging for me is that we are beginning to maintain that. So previously, the oscillations will be too extreme. So we'll be, at one stage, we'll be at 26,000 megawatts, and then suddenly we're at 29,000 megawatts. You can see it's steady, stepwise, and it's an illustration that there's some degree of applications who are very deliberate and focused in how we are addressing this situation. And then the improvements on the generation side, essentially what you are seeing as capacity available, then makes it possible to create an additional buffer for us to have increased levels of planned outages. So I was listening to people having a panel conversation, and in one of the conferences, and someone was saying, oh, the improvements we are making is as a result of not reducing, rather, significantly planned outages. Now we can see that we are beginning to build room, and as a result of building that room, we are taking that opportunity for us to be able to ensure that we are able to improve a ramp up on planned outages. And this is important because when we get out of this challenge, I'll be able to say with the highest degree of confidence that load shedding is behind us, because the amount of effort and work we have exerted in ensuring that we stick to philosophy maintenance, planned maintenance, has been so meticulous that they were confident about the reliability of these units as we put them back onto the grid. And then the area that still requires attention is the one of partial load losses. So essentially, these are units that are operating, but they are not at optimal capacity. So the significant amount of capacity that we are losing as a result of a myriad of factors, and of course we can share what those are. And you can see that they were not able to fully exploit these units. And you can see that although that we are beginning to see, if you like, those improvements that I'm talking about, 13,681 by the 30th of June is significantly better than 16,468 when we opened the week. So an improvement of approximately 3,100 megawatts. But we really want to keep on making the improvements. We'll be at it, and we can see now we've breached what I call the psychological mark of 14,000 megawatts. We are below that. And I'm not suggesting that it's not, will not deteriorate, but what we are seeing is that it's a downward trend. And for me, that is important. It's just an appreciation of the trend over a period of time. So just a longitudinal study of what is it that constitute the performance of this unit. And in there, you can excavate a number of facts, including the fact that we are becoming significantly more reliable, if you like, going forward. And of course, I did indicate the issues around the peak forecast. You can see that we came nowhere close to the 34,000 megawatts that we had projected as part of our winter outlook when we generated the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario had two elements. The first one was to say that what we refer to as the unplanned capacity loss factor will be upwards of, will be 18,000 plus. And we can see that on average the past week we have 15,400 as the average, and in fact, by 30th of June, we're at 13,681. So that's the one element, the improvement. And the second one, we had said that in terms of the worst case scenario as part of the winter outlook, remember we generated 3 scenarios. We had projected that the demand will be about 34,000 megawatts. And the most that we had in the past week was on the 28th of June, where we hit about 31,540. So really this is a significant improvement. An area that again will receive additional attention is the one on outage slips. Outage slips means that we are failing to meet our promise to return the units at the time that we had determined. And you can see that it accounts for about 1,503. That's the average. But the point I'm making again is the trend line. You can see that there's a downward trend. And when you aggregate and put these things together, they are responsible for us to be able to have 16 hours of the day, no load shedding, 8 hours of the day, stage 3 load shedding. And this is by no accident. That's the point I'm making, is because of the exceptional efforts of the men and women at Eskom. What this slide attempts to demonstrate, so what we're trying to show you is what is the delta between your demand and your generation. And of course, once the system operator uses a tool that we refer to in common parlance as load shedding to be able to close that gap. The higher the gap is, the higher the stages of load shedding. And you can see now what is happening, that we are beginning to approximate, if you like, generation is now beginning to keep up with demand. And that's why you are able to see during certain days of periods of the day, significant periods of the day, I may add, about 2/3 of the day we are not having load shedding, is because we are beginning to balance that. But what is important is that we need to ensure that generation far exceeds demand, and in that way we'll be able to pull out a number of units through planned maintenance, and we are able to build a buffer so that as the South African economy continues to grow and recover, that we've got sufficient generation capacity to fuel, support, provide the necessary oxygen for us to be able to address the issues around the growth of the country and the degree to which you need a reliable power supply. Again, the planned outages, again, an illustration. So what did we do? The beginning of May, ramped up planned outages because we were foreseeing that there's likely going to be increased demand as we enter the intensity of winter, so that these units don't get to fail. And then it went down. But because of the recoveries we are seeing on the generation side, the steady nature of that recovery, then it gives us an opportune time for us to be able to ramp up planned demand in the midst of winter. It's an important point there. In the midst of winter, we're able to ramp up planned maintenance. It's an illustration of a system that is recovering, a system that is getting closer to what it should be, its level of performance. I did make the point that partial load losses is an area that is receiving attention on our part. And like I said, the last time when we met, one of the briefings was to say that we are tapping on the expertise outside Eskom to go and work with the general managers at the various stations. We are able to diagnose and determine the root cause of failures from one unit to the other. So if you like, the performance of this unit is not an aggregate performance. You need to have an appreciation of, if you go to station X, what is the performance of this unit? What are the common failures that are responsible for the failing of that unit and or responsible for the partial load losses? And then we know the biggest culprit on units going out is boiler tube leaks. The issues on partial load losses has to do in part the quality of the coal. It has to do in part in relation to us keeping to the emissions parameters, and that's why we've got the expertise to help us, amongst others, to address those issues, and of course we are listing them. So what I'm saying is that we are very meticulous, we are deliberate. There's a degree of granularity on how we're beginning to understand, if you like, the performance of these units and the kinds of skills and interventions that are required to help us to address this situation. Again, like I said, outage slips are coming down. The last slide I did say now, it's about 1,300 megawatts or so. So we moved from a high in May of close to 4,000. And look at where we are. We are just dipping below 1,500. So it's important that you have that appreciation, and that accounts, if you like, for the degree of room that has been created for us to be able to ensure that we have the kind of generation capacity that we are having. Is the issues around also creates a buffer for us to take the units out and get to fix them. Of course, I've spoken about what the focus was, and then you can see that, if you like, the peak focus essentially is focus is lower than the actual. And the point I made earlier on is a function of a number of factors. A very aggressive and effective campaign to make a plea to households to reduce, if you like, demand, the kind of interventions that we have made in relation to programs, and also at the various municipalities, City of Johannesburg, amongst others, and the many that are doing exceptional work, City Power, to work with communities so that we are able to reduce demand without undermining their ability to meet their daily needs. So when we reduce this demand, it doesn't deteriorate the quality of life, but essentially it begins to engender, if you like, good practices on how we use energy, and we use it sparingly. And we are not complacent about energy being available all the time. Now we are beginning to transition. When I say we are beginning to transition, is that there are steady improvements that we are making on the generation side. I'm very confident that we'll keep on making those improvements. And we know that we are making these improvements outside the 4 units at Kgosientsho. So there's a 3 that went out as a result of the issues around the flue gas desulfurization. There's also Unit 5 that has not come back. It should be projected to be fired by October, and then the other 3 units will come November and December. And then it's also outside the availability of the unit in Medupi. Unit 4, we did indicate to you the kind of efforts that we are making to ensure that we bring it early. We've got a spare generator that we procured from the Netherlands. So it's outside that. If you put those together, essentially you're talking about 4,000 megawatts. And just to put it into context, I did say the last time that 1 percentage point increase is about 477 megawatts. So if you are close to about 4,000 megawatts, so you are really talking about 8 percentage point increases. So when those units come back, you will see that they will be above close to 70% of the energy availability factor. And when we assume this office, when the president made this necessary intervention, of course they called him a bluff, and then we are beginning to make these strides. When we came in, we were hovering at 48% of the energy availability factor, and we can see that there's been significant additions. If you get to 70%, then there would have been, if you like, about 22 percentage points improvement in that. So we are seeing those steady improvement. The area that remains vulnerable is the one on the transmission side. Vulnerable on the multiple areas. The first one is that it undermines our ability to bring on board new generation capacity from renewables in areas that gives us the best returns. So if you had to do a wind atlas, the best areas for you to have wind is the coastal areas of the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. And I did share with you the last time, and you can see here that really you don't have a significant grid capacity. It's exhausted in the Northern Cape. It's about to be exhausted in the Western Cape. It's not sufficient in the Eastern Cape to accommodate the amount of energy that we want to introduce. And then the other one is about strengthening. So you want to reduce technical losses, although we are one of the best in the world, so we will keep at that. but also want to ensure that you continue to provide, if you like, quality supply. You undermine the dips, and really the dips really has to do with the quality of infrastructure at the reticulation level, especially the distribution side, the ones that sit with municipalities, and some of them they sit with ESCOM. And when you talk to the OEMs, especially the OEMs in the auto sector, they tell you that a dip can undermine their production capacity. So even you have a 3-second dip in the quality of electricity, some of these robots, they are likely going to lose their memory. The paint shops, you have to discard whatever was in the paint, the body, the part that was in the body, and then you have to restart, and also restarting takes a lot of time. So this is an area that requires attention. And because of the configuration of the transmission network, which is informed by the fuel sources, we are a coal-based economy. On the generation side, the concentration of the power plants is in the coal fields of Mpumalanga, and therefore the density of transmission is there in the northern parts of the country. And we know that also consumption, the load, 72% of the load is in the northern part of the country, and that's why you are seeing that concentration. There's a need for us to be able to address the issue of transmission. And I was making the point the other day that we can't kick the can down the road in the similar manner that we have done with generation, when in fact the experts were saying at the time that you need to ramp up your generation capacity outside the performance of the installed capacity, but you need additional generation capacity because you are connecting more people to the grid as a part of the benefit of the victory of the democratic project. But we are seeing the South African economy growing significantly. And therefore, in terms of the projections at the time, that you are going to get to a stage where what you are generating is not sufficient to meet the demand. We kick the can down the road as policymakers, and we are sitting with this problem. We are trying to rectify this problem as we speak now. So we shouldn't do the same mistake on transmission and think that will resolve transmission sometime in the future. Transmission must be resolved today, and it's essentially, it's not on the planning side, essentially it's on the financing side. ESCOM is working on a transmission development plan, very competent individuals there. So there's no issue there. The issue is around the financing. We know that part of the conditions that came with the fiscal support that National Treasury gave to ESCOM is that you can't borrow. So we need to find better ways or more innovative ways of how we are going to resolve this problem. And I'm happy to say, like I said the last time when we met last week, that we've put a report together on how we think we can come with a solution that do three things. One is that you tap into the very rich liquidity that is sitting with the private sector. And then the second one, that what you do is that you do it in such a manner that you don't relinquish ownership of the grid, but the state is still responsible for the grid. And thirdly is that the system operator at ESCOM is solely responsible for the management of the grid. Even if you can have elements or components of the grid that are financed creatively by private sector, having put together conditions that, of course, does not put a burden on the end consumer, does not relinquish ownership, but ultimately ownership and management of the grid resides with ESCOM, and that can be delegated to any other person, because really you're talking about energy sovereignty, and how you do it, you don't undermine the sovereignty of the country. And that's what our report is doing, and I'll share it with you once it has gone through the necessary approval processes on what we are doing. It's going to be revolutionary, far advanced, and you will see that we are beginning to state the case that don't kick the can down the road. You are going to sit with a transmission problem. I did say that the biggest risk to any possibility, remote possibility of a grid collapse, it's not on your generation side, but it's on your transmission side. Single point of failure, we need to address that. And of course, with renewables coming on board and various parts of the country having built that resilience of the grid, you are likely going to have a distributed generation. And that's one of the ways that you are going to protect yourself from a single point of failure. Here we are trying to show you that there's a significant work that is being done in ensuring that we are able to address the transmission side and extend the possibility of extending the transmission network. So we are going a bit south now because that's where our problems are, and because the opportunities reside there in relation to renewables. And then as I conclude, I did say that the last time, just to give you the assurance that we are accelerating the release of the further bid window, that is bid window number 5. Like I said the last time, that the intention is that that should happen before the end of July. And I spoke about the one-stop shop, so we were able to make sure that we aggregate all those government services that are necessary to unlocking, if you like, the issues of private sector investment on the generation side. Of course, we are going to come with these innovations also on the transmission side. And of course, the point we are making is that obtain the decision on additional ministerial determination and license applications. And the point really we are trying to convey today is that we have made significant progress. We're confident about our ability to take South Africa out of load shedding. The commitment I had made before, working with a team of competent engineers at Eskom, the leadership at Megawatt Park, the leadership of the board under Mr. Makwana. Like I say, I can't overemphasize the contribution of Mr. Ngumalo and his team there at Eskom. We are making significant strides. I want to say to South Africans, like I promised before, we will get out of this load shedding problem. We will build a buffer and ensure that the South African economy is able to realize its potential. Everyone that cares to observe the lie of the land, you can see that the significant improvements that we are making. We are providing some degree of relief. That's not sufficient because during parts of the peak, we have stage 3 load shedding. I want to give you the confidence that we are going to resolve this. It's an engineering problem. On the leadership issues, the president has appointed the Minister of Electricity to provide stewardship to that resolution. I eat, breathe, and sleep the resolution of the load shedding, and I'm confident that with the team that is helping us, we will be able to resolve load shedding. Thank you very much, DG.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Colleagues, it was the 9th of February 2023. The President announced that he's making interventions that will address the electricity challenges. Today is the 2nd of July 2023. The Honorable Minister of Electricity, Dr. Ramokgopa, has informed us of the significant improvements and work that has been done to date to ensure that we turn the tide around. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Colleagues, we're now going to be moving to the questions to the Honorable Minister. We will start with the colleagues who are in the room and then move to online colleagues as well. The information is being provided to the media. So what we request, colleagues, is that when you have been appointed to pose your question, just introduce yourself and also introduce the media house that you are representing. And once more, my name is Nomonde Mnugwa, the Acting Director General of the Government Communication and Information System. So we can move. Are there any questions in the room? Okay, note yours. Any other? Okay, yes. So in that form, Josias, you'll help us.
Thank you. Slinda Ramasivan from ENCA. I would just like to get an update from the Minister with regards to sabotage, incidents of sabotage. Where are we in terms of the, finding those who are responsible for some of the issues around generation and transmission in terms of, basically not allowing the system to be able to operate optimally.
much. It's Ahmed Kaji from News in Africa. Just speaking towards the challenge of transmission that seems to be a key theme coming out of today's address. Is the Minister working with other government departments to address some of those challenges? Because obviously transmission will obviously be affected both by internal factors and external factors. So just to get an update on whether there is interdepartmental cooperation between government departments.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Pelly, can you take us through the online questions?
Yes. We have the first question. It's a set of 3 from William Horn, Network 24. The first question is, could the Minister please clarify what the risk of too much rapidly deployed solar power would be for the grid? The second question is, what is the current state of incentivizing IPPs to launch projects in provinces other than the Northern Cape and Eastern Cape, where conditions for renewable power are most suitable? The third question is, the renewed focus on philosophy maintenance at ESCOM power stations refers. Would the Minister say that any of the gains currently materializing are due to previously touted focuses on philosophy maintenance, or is it only being done properly now? And the next question is from Terence Klima. Terence has got 2 again. The first one being, did NECOM discuss ESCOM's interim grid capacity access rules before they were published? And are you concerned by the response of industry, which has described the rules as onerous? If so, what is your plan for addressing these concerns? Terence Klima again asks, are you concerned that the delay to the battery procurement program could have a negative knock-on effect for the upcoming public procurement rounds? The last question, again, is from William Horn, Network 24. It's the last at this stage. What is the progress on the acquisition and rollout of smart meters to limit consumers' energy usage? Is any estimate of the timelines available? And is it known whether the installation of these meters will be mandated? That's all for now, teacher.
Okay. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have Minister who's going to be responding to the questions. He's also joined by the technical experts. We have Rudy Dix from Presidency. He's connecting online. We also have Thomas Conrad, also from ESCOM. He's also connecting online. Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much to the questions from our friends from the media. And just to Slindile's question, on Friday or Thursday, on Thursday or Wednesday, I visited the op center where Workstream 6 is working. Workstream 6 is focusing on issues of fraud, crime, whatever you call sabotage and safety. And I received a detailed presentation from some of the most esteemed generals and also practitioners from State Security Agency, from SAPS, and they were able to give me a detailed account of the kind of progress that we're making. So it's impressive progress. We are registering a number of arrests. We are bringing people before the courts, and they've got their own characterization of the nature of the problem. I did say in one of the briefings that we're going to have a dedicated briefing just on the security issues, and I said that I'm no expert on that matter, so I will not venture into that space. So I want to say to members of the media and the South African public that when we have that briefing, I think the generals will be here and you'll be able to see that we're making tremendous progress. Of course, they did make the point that when they were making inroads in addressing the issues, that are responsible for, partly responsible rather, for the dire energy situation that we are seeing. They were able to see a displacement of that crime into other areas. They were able to explain to me where the concentration of this crime is in the country, and they are making a distinction between that which is happening internally inside ESCOM and that is happening outside as a result of those who are inside ESCOM abetting and assisting, and they are able to explain the linkages between this and other syndicates that we are seeing in other areas of the South African economy that are undermining the growth of this country. So I'm going to leave that for that briefing without necessarily providing details other than we're making significant progress. On the issues of ending load shedding, I'm very consistent. I will not give you the date. I'm going to give you the amount of megawatts that are coming on stream. And I've been able to illustrate a number of things. The first one is that we're improving the energy availability factor. So if you reference this to April, we're at 29,000. Of course, averaging that, there are days where we're breaching the 30,000 megawatt mark. So you can see that we've added upwards of 3,500 megawatts, 4,000 megawatts. So it's 4 stages of load shedding. I'm able to show you how we've been able to reduce the outage slips. I did say that now we're sitting at 1,305 or so. When we started much earlier, it was at about 2,999. So about 3 stages of load shedding. I did indicate that the partial load losses at some point, they were upwards of 18,000 megawatts. We're averaging about 15,500, but we have seen that June the 30th, we've breached the 14,000 mark. We're below 14,000. We're at about 3,800 megawatts. I did show you that as a result of a number of our interventions, and also thanks to South Africans and the industry, we're not hitting the historic high of demand. We had projected we could be at about 34,000 megawatts. We are now at averaging about 30,000 megawatts. The highest that we have seen is about 31,000 megawatts. I have just said to you that we are bringing back, and the aggregate of that means that the energy availability factor is moved from the low of about 48%. As I speak to you, we are beginning to stabilize at about 60%. So if you like, we've added 12 percentage points in the improvement of the energy availability factor. And this is before those 4 units come back from Kusile. This is before we are able to bring that unit in Medupi. I said it will approximate about 4,000 megawatts. So you can see now we'll be getting closer to about 70%, 68% plus. And of course, the reason why I'm not placing a date, I don't know what the demand is. I know what the generation will be. I know when we get into winter, summer condition, that at the current rate, generation will far exceed the demand. You'll make your call on whether load shedding will be gone. I am sticking to that. I will not make a populist or rather public pronouncement about dates. I'm giving you, that's why I dedicate a week to tell you what are the megawatts that are coming on stream. But I'm confident about our ability to resolve load shedding. Just Mr. Kaji on, yes, I mean, typically we'll work with other parts of government with regards to the transmission side. There are obvious departments. The first one will be the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. The state is the biggest landowner, fixed assets in the country, single biggest owner, fixed asset, in particular land. You need servitude, you need to go over these pieces of land, you need access to that when you expand the lines. The second one is the Minister of Finance. Of course, that conditions attached to the fiscal support. ESCOM is not allowed to borrow, but it's important that as we configure this solution, we are not going to overburden, if you like, the fiscals, and the design of that instrument must be such that it doesn't commit the fiscals, but essentially it's a project finance, if you like. So we, like I said, the details will be able to share with yourselves. And then there are issues of the environment. You might be going through environmentally sensitive areas who might lead licenses will do that, to the extent that some of them might require the degree of water use licenses for whatever the case might be. Then is the Department of Water Affairs and Fisheries. And then to Mr. William Horn, I was reading an article, it's an authoritative article, and he was making the point that there was a major development in Europe just in the month of May. For the first time in the history of Europe, the amount of energy they've generated from renewables surpassed what they generated from thermal power. And then they go further, they expect and also the European countries, the biggest problem they have, first is the intermittency of this supply, source of supply, and the fact that for as long as we have not developed, if you like, storage capacity beyond the kind of technologies that we have, because the best that we have is 4 hours of storage capacity, then we are sitting with a big problem, that the grid that they've designed can accommodate the surge. So it's important that they address that, otherwise it's going to undermine grid stability. We have been to China, the country with the largest installment of solar PV, 488 gigawatts of PV, about 380 gigawatts of wind. There's no one in the country, in the world, who has done as aggressive as China. They repeat and say, you need base load, and that's why they are also rolling out the coal-fired power station, so that we are able to address the issues that are going to, what the renewable energy relies on, the redundancy of base loads. As you can't wipe it out, irrespective of what some experts who ostensibly, if you like, expect, they want to share with us. That's not your sole solution. It's a combination of the mix of these energies. So it's going to be, of course, renewables, and of course we are decarbonizing, we are going that route. We will continue to flag those risks and say what are the interventions we are making to address and mitigate against those risks. Yes, that's the point I'm making, Mr. Horn. We went to Vietnam, the most aggressive program of solar PV, succeeded in doing that by introducing a very progressive dispensation with regards to the feed-in tariff. Over a period of 12 months, they added 8 gigawatts, and they say to us, don't do it at the rate at which we have done unless you have fixed the grid. Otherwise, you are going to sit with the same problem that they are sitting with. And that's why it's important to learn from those who've got first mover advantage, those who have moved first, and then we are going to benefit from last mover advantages. Are there any incentives for private producers to locate in areas that they have got great capacity? No, the best incentive is just knowing that there's great capacity. And maybe just to demystify this point, any place in the country South Africa has got the best irradiation level compared to other parts of the world. It's an important point to make. We are better than the whole of Europe, even if you had to go to Mpumalanga. But relative to what is possible in the country, the best location is in the Eastern Cape. So our conditions, mention any place in the country, is better than what Europe can offer. So that's the point. So the incentive is there. I mean, we don't need to give you an additional incentive. All that we need to do is to make sure that we make it possible for these private sector players to locate in those spaces where there's great capacity. I don't think that we need additional incentive. It's fine across the length and breadth of the country. And then, yes, on the issues of philosophy maintenance, yes, I have my views. I mean, part of the problem that we were experiencing now, outside the policy issues, the choices that we've made as a democratic government, thinking that the private sector will come into the space and resolve the issues of generation, and only realize much later, 2006, 2007, to say, look, let's, as the state, build new generation, Medupi and Kusile. That's how it came about. Outside those shortcomings, there are issues of leadership and management. And that's why the introduction of the head of generation
Mr. Begging Umalo. It's important, it's a major point of significance in our resolution of this problem. And of course, it has been made possible first by improving, if you like, the performance of the installed units, and then it introduces a gap for you to improve on philosophy maintenance, planned maintenance, and that's what we see. It's a leadership issue, so that we focus on making sure that these units get to perform. I did say that on the issues on the demand side, there's a number of collaborators, because it's on the distribution side, some of them. Municipalities are key players. There's a number of municipalities that we are working on, the last time when I was here, I indicated that Nelson Mandela, Buffalo, City of Johannesburg, City Power in particular, the City of Cape Town, Drakensberg municipality, they are doing tremendous work there. So we'll work with them and try to ensure that we create conditions for them to roll out aggressively, but also have new participants in the form of municipalities. I did report in one of the briefings that we're having a conversation with SALGA and see what kind of instruments that can be introduced to incentivize households and people to go that route there. And then, yes, you are right, William, one of the issues that we think requires additional attention is the need for the possibility of mandating, if you like, the installation of solar or smart meters rather going into the future. We are discussing just the other day in one of the committees in government the possibility of making it mandatory as government roll out government-sponsored houses, what we call RDPs. The solar water geyser must be a design requirement. And then we can work with private sector and see if we can introduce a similar dispensation in the private sector. But for that which government is responsible for, we think that it should be a design requirement. On the issues of the grid rules, yes, I did hear some players in the space saying that the requirements are a bit more onerous, and that's why I'll be taking time in the next 2 weeks to sit with some of the players there, Terence, Mr. Creamer, just to hear what the issues are. What is it that we're trying to resolve for? Is that there are projects that have earned access to the grid, the right to the grid, and essentially those projects are not getting to financial close, and it amounts to hogging the grid, essentially locking out other potential projects that are ready to connect to the grid, have about to achieve a financial close. The only impediment is access to the grid. So we need to find a solution to address that problem. And that's what ESCOM was attempting to do. And I know that there's a number of permutations on how best we can resolve this problem. You can give a window to say that it must be achieved by this period. If you fail to do that, then you are forfeiting. But we'll sit with those just to understand what the real issues are. On the issues of battery procurement, yes, I did say there's 1,200 megawatts of battery procurement as part of bid window number 7. We'll be doing that by July. So if there are issues around procurement, and I'm not sure procurement in this instance, whether it's with regards to the speed with which government is procuring or the availability of these batteries, I think it's something perhaps I haven't understood correctly. But yes, the point I'm making is that we are making everything possible to address the situation, Sis Nomond.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Colleagues, we're now going to be moving to the last round of questions. We will start in the room and then move online. Is the last and the final round of questions. Since there's none in the room, Sis Paley, can you take us through the online questions?
There's no further questions, Secretary.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think in thanking the Minister, we would like the Minister to just come up and summarize or sum up. Minister, we take note of the improvements that have been made to date based on the promises to emphasize that were made during the SONA in February 2023. But we also take note of the fact that South Africa is a global player, and so are our broadcasting platforms. And therefore, whilst we have been briefed as a nation in terms of the improvement, we have international community that is interested in our nation for various reasons. But I would like the minister just to talk to few segments. We are a very beautiful country, and therefore we attract various kind of tourists. And as such, when we are starting the winter season, we have snow and everything, and obviously people might want to come to South Africa for tourist purposes. We have work nomads as well, people who have decided to make South Africa as their own destination as they do their work, and who want to be assured in terms of should they really settle in South Africa as work nomads. We also have the current investors who might be starting to think of other options, whether they want to leave or not, and we need to tell them that this is the best country to be in, and potential investors as well. I would allow you, Minister, to just come and sum up. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nomondo. Maybe just to your point, when we visited China, we had the opportunity to go and visit their entity, state-owned entity that is responsible for the rollout of nuclear. And now they've got one of the biggest installed nuclear capacity in the whole world. So we're just trying to understand. And our host said something very remarkable there. And they say, we're surprised that you are coming here, because in 2004, when we were starting this program, we didn't have any knowledge. We came to Eskom. We went to Koeberg, the most distinguished and exemplary of all nuclear power stations in the world. So there's very little you can learn from us. We have learned everything from you. And today they've got the biggest installed capacity. It just says a lot about where we are. I was the other day, in my previous life as the head of infrastructure and investment, we're having a conversation with one of the European countries. You know, when we're examining the possibility of a speed train, of course, working with the then Minister Mbalula, is still an ongoing conversation. And the European country says, no, but did you know that the first fast train in the whole world was there in South Africa? You are the first ones to do it, to reach speeds of 120 kilometers an hour. So what do you want to learn from us? I'm just saying that just the weakening of the state over a period of time, the hemorrhaging of skills over a period of time. When we met with the minister of my equivalent there in Mozambique, of course, his portfolio is much bigger. When we announced that 100 megawatts immediately available, 600 available. And then at the end, he says, Minister, I need a request. Can Eskom come and help us in grid expansion and also power station? Because you know better than we do. Again, just an illustration of the fact that I think there's a lot of injury that has been inflicted on the South African state. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that there's been that injury, and we must do something significant to turn around. And this is a typical example of what has been the cost of the state not making opposite and appropriate policy choices. And we have landed where we are, outside the performance of the unit. So the state can't be retrenched. The state must take leadership. And that's why in this instance I'm saying, with regards to the grid, the transmission will not make the same mistake. We are going to take leadership of how we are going to make that intervention. And that leadership is about the sovereign interest of the country. That leadership is not about the balance sheet of Eskom. It's about what it requires for us to build energy resilience. It's an important articulation. So I'm not standing here to preserve the balance sheet of Eskom. I'm here to preserve the interest of the sovereign. And in doing that, of course, Eskom is a major player. But we'll do everything possible outside Eskom to make sure that we're able to provide reliable quality electricity supply, so that we're able to address energy famine, because we are missing that point. We have not yet achieved levels of universal access. We're in Utukela now, on Friday with the minister. There are people who don't know what is load shedding because they've never been connected to the grid. Many, many years after the victory of the democratic project. And that's why that should be a focus. So, when we enter this conversation, of course, we must decarbonize. I fully agree with that. Of course, you can leapfrog. People might not necessarily have to be connected to the national grid. The kind of technology that exists simply means that you can move from a state of darkness, get light, without necessarily going through the process of being connected to the grid, because we have been able to do what we call microgrid. We are getting to distributed generation. We are getting to self-generation, rooftop solar. So the kind of technology that exists allows us to leapfrog. So the solution doesn't sit with ESCOM. There are multiple solutions, but ESCOM is a major player, indispensable to the resolution of this problem. And I want to say to the South African people who are keeping to the transparency, honesty, I did say will be brutally frank. I want to say to you, we will resolve load shedding. I've given you the megawatts. Do your numbers, then you'll know when load shedding will end. I'm not here to give you dates. You are seeing it. 6 weeks ago, stage 6 intense. Now as I speak to you, 14 hours, 16 hours of the day, 2/3 of the day, no load shedding. We come back with stage 3. You'll see even that is going to taper down, and you'll get to a stage where we'll not have load shedding in a 24-hour cycle. That's going to be the next psychological mark. Just that day where we are able to sustain it, no load shedding, just once a day, 24 hours, it's a psychological mark. It means that we are getting to a stage where it can be done. Then the next conversation is whether we can sustain it. I want to say to the South African people, we are much, much closer to that day than a lot of you thought. A lot of the many pundits are saying. Our point, we are transfixed to the resolution of the problem, unconcerned about people who have never visited a power station, people who have never visited a factory that manufactures panels, people who have never written a test on an engineering question, but we are focused on resolving this. And as engineers, we are more than confident of resolving this problem. And thank you very much for your support. And thanks to friends from the media for joining us and carrying this. It is much appreciated. Thanks, Ms. Nomond.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that encouragement and the stories that we need to retell so that we can take courage and understand that this can be done. The meeting, the briefing session is adjourned. Thank you.